Hey traders, Greg here, Master Trader. We all come to the markets knowing little to nothing about how the markets operate. And that being the case, we're all susceptible to, being very vigorous and wanting to learn new things, and being exposed to misleading information is the norm. So this was an article that's in Market Watch today. Micron stock drops as first death cross in 2 years appears. And so it goes on to explain what a death cross is, the 50 MA crossing under the 200 MA, and it goes on to explain, and back there in 2022, how it dropped quite a bit before it began to bottom. You can go and read the article. But these type of things are very subjective, and when you see examples from the past, how something worked, it creates potentially a belief how it's going to produce the same thing in the future. That's just not the case. Sometimes it is, but again, those of us that are new, when we were new, we're trying to learn, of course, and we go on and look at these things and make some assumptions that the past equals the future. And even though those disclaimers will say that it doesn't, we're looking for ways to make money. So I've gone back and looked at back there, as you can see in 2022, when the 50 crossed under the 200. And what preceded that was this sharp move up, and it got really volatile, and it whipped down and back up again. Some of that's going on in the markets right now, in the market indices. Semiconductors led the way down, but you can see how this whipped down and whipped up, and during a topping process, it often gets really whippy like that. And down at the bottom, it often gets whippy, and then prices eventually begin to settle down. Things get tight as the forces between supply and demand begin to equalize each other and support bills, and then the cycle resolves again and prices begin to move back up. So what you could see happen back then was it crossed, and then things continued to be erratic but tightened up considerably from what preceded it. That often is the case. And as buyers and sellers come in and create these pivot lows and pivot highs opposing each other, then those forces, is it going to break to the upside? Is it going to break to the downside? You see back then it broke to the downside and continued to do that, and it went down and down. And what the article goes down to say is how much Micron declined from that time until eventually it got whippy again, very erratic and whippy. And then it began to settle down a bit, and it started to get tighter, and the pivot highs and lows began to get closer together, and then the 50 crossed above the 200 in what's called a golden cross. Well, sometimes these things just whip back and forth, and they'll just annihilate you as they whip back and forth, especially with short-term moving averages. So what happened now? What's happening now? So, back a little while ago, semiconductors were in favor, and eventually went up and made this accelerated move to the upside. And that's another way that trends end, where they begin to accelerate higher. So here it accelerated higher. It pulled back, moved up again, starts getting a bit erratic, and it accelerates. And then when it drops like that so sharply, this is institutional selling. So it fell very sharply, then it begins to stabilize. It whips up. Now it's down on support. And down here, it's already down. Let's just eyeball that, I guess, close to 50% or so. And it crosses. So should we now assume that it's going to go down another 50%? The reality is we just don't know. But right now it's on support. There's some longer term support here. And we need to now watch this to see, semiconductors were downgraded today, some of them. And so this may continue to drop. The point being is we don't make assumptions based on something subjective like a moving average crossover. Is this in a bearish trend? Absolutely. On a short-term basis, it may pop up a little bit. We'll see what it does. Maybe it goes down. But we do not make assumptions that because in 2022, Micron fell because of a cross of a 50 under the 200. That is not a trading strategy. Is it bearish? Sure. If it chops sideways here and it cannot advance, we may have an opportunity where it'll drop again. And inevitably, it may come all the way back down to this long-term support over here in time. And we can mark off that area and set an alert down there to see if it comes down. And if it does, we may want to take a look at Micron from a long-term perspective because it is a stock that historically does come back, and institutions believe it to be cheap and they begin to buy. As you can see over here in 2023, it got erratic, whipping back and forth, and then eventually it began to move higher, broke out, and so on. So, lesson here. Whatever happening in the news, it may bring your attention to a particular stock. It does not mean you're going to act on that piece of information. You're going to look at it objectively, see what prices are in relation to the past. Is there a pattern to trade or not? And it just may mean move on to something else because there just isn't any opportunity here. If this was to pop up a little bit, we could be definitely interested in a put spread with income strategy of selling a credit spread directionally. It's not anything we'd be interested in right now. If it did gap up on a short-term basis, we may trade it long for a couple of days or intraday trades. But from an investment point of view, this just is not it. Stay away. But that doesn't mean we can't use other strategies for trading this at the appropriate time. I hope that helps. If you have any questions, email me, Greg at Master Trader.